Hello students, this video is going to be the start of the introduction game 2D game for Godot for our game development class. This video will probably be split into a couple just depending on how we're going, and it does require a few things from you before beginning. Firstly, you need to have downloaded and installed, in quotation marks, the Godot game engine. That can be found on our class page, some instructions, as well as obviously instructions on the Godot website itself. You also need to have accessed the Godot engine tutorial, the first game. Again, links are available either on the Godot website or in our class page as well on Schoolbox. What you're seeing on my screen at the moment is the basic Godot window ready to start, so as soon as you open the program. And I've also got this second tab sort of opened with the tutorial on my right hand side so that you can see what I'm reading at the same time as what I'm doing in Godot. So on your screen you may be able to do something similar. You might have to have it separate, and I believe I should have, hopefully by the time you have this video, also a printable version of this this document at the same time. So to begin with, we need to start a new project in Godot. So we're going to choose new project up the top here, and we're going to give it a name. So in my class, I'd always like projects to begin with your last name, then your first name, so that we can make it clear whose work it is, and then the name of the project. So we'll just call this one Creepers. So for me, that would be Tomic, Nathan, and Creepers. So something like that, obviously substituting with your own names, not mine. And then the second thing you need to know is it always needs to start a new project in an empty folder. So by default, because I'm on Windows, it's asking me to originally save it in the Documents folder, but that's not going to work because, of course, Documents has stuff in it, and that's what it's saying here. You can't use this. You need to make a new folder. So if I go to Browse and I simply make a new folder here, for example, I'm going to use the same format, so my last name, then first name, then the name of the project. Press OK, and it's fine with that, so I'm inside that folder now. You can see that up the top, and then I'm going to say, yep, I want to use that folder for going forward. So now I've got a nice green tick saying, yep, that's an OK folder to start this new project in. As far as the render is concerned, I'm suggesting we just use compatibility for the moment. It means the most computers, etc., will be able to use this file. At a later stage, if you were making a mobile-specific game, you might choose mobile. And if you were trying to do something at the cutting edge, you might choose forward plus. But let's go with compatibility for the moment. And I'm not worried about version controlling, so I can just leave this as it shows there. And I'm simply going to press create and edit. And it's going to open up my Godot window in that new game development area. Here it is. Now I'm just going to try and shrink that down again to match what I had before, where I had part of the screen. That's better, so we can still see now the instructions and the game. So first of all, before we start on the instructions, let's look at the setup of Godot. On the left top here, we have our scene, and this is where we're going to be creating all our nodes and everything that make up the game that we're developing. On the left bottom, we have the file system that we can manage our resources in. The main section, of course, is where we will do our working. So this will be both our visual and our coding space. And then on the right, we have our inspector. If you are using 4.1 or above, like I am, some of these can be undocked and moved around. But again, for now, I suggest you keep them where they are, just so they match most tutorials. As you become more familiar with Godot, or especially if you have a larger screen or multiple screens, you may find that undocking and moving some of these around might suit your workflow better. But again, I strongly suggest just leaving it as is for the moment. So let's begin. If we look at the instructions now, I'm not going to read these things out word for word. You can read through it in detail, and you should as you start working through this. But we're essentially going to be working towards making this game here. And you can see sort of a little animated GIF version of the game. You've got a little character that you're moving around or dodging. These other things called creepers. And you get a score as each of them goes off the screen. And of course, if you hit one, that is game over. So let's scroll down, and it talks a little bit about all that. I'm not going to read through this with you. You can do all of that in your own time. I'm simply going to start by going next to the first real part. So the first thing we need to do is set up the project itself. So that's what we've kind of already done. We've made our new project. We are going to need to now get our assets. Now the assets are also available from our Schoolbox page, or you can just grab them directly from here. Grabbing those assets will download a zip file, as it says, and inside will be an art and a fonts folder that you need to get. Now, I'm doing this just off to the left of my screen, so what you can't see. So I'm literally opening those up at the moment, and I'm going to bring those in. Now, I'll show you what's in the folder. So I've extracted that folder, and if I just grab that and bring it into the recording window, you can see that inside that folder that I just extracted, there is an art and a fonts folder. That's exactly what it asked or said over here in that box. And all I'm going to do now is bring both of those folders, and I'm just going to drag them into my file resources over here. So just onto this res so that they go in here. Okay, so I've now got the art and the fonts that were part of that resource pack, and I'll just get rid of that window that I don't need anymore. Now you probably can't drag them in directly from a zip file, so you need to extract that zip file first onto maybe your desktop temporarily, move those files into your game, and then you can, if you want to, delete that temporary folder because these are now part of your actual resources, so you can do that there. The next thing we need to do is set the size of the game. So by default, the game has a certain size. It's usually more of a landscape style, but as it says here, we want to have more of a phone style, so a tall, thin game. So we're going to do that by changing some project settings. So in our project menu at the top here, we're going to choose project settings, and then we're going to come down to the display section and then the window section. And we can see at the top of that we have the width and the height, just like in the image here. And we want to set our width and our height to be 480 wide and 720 tall. Essentially, this is simulating, kind of a screen of a phone, if you like. If we scroll a bit further down, we also want to change our stretch option. So again, in the same place, so still in project settings, display window, a bit further down we have the stretch mode. For now, we'd say canvas items is what we want to be able to stretch, and we'll keep our aspect ratio. Now, I'm not going to explain that in too much detail here, other than to say that means if we resize our window while we're playing, things will stay proportionally the same. They won't stretch really wide or stretch really tall. They'll stretch equally in all directions. So it's a good idea to set these options regardless of your game for the moment until you more fully understand what they may or may not do for you. So we're happy with that. We're going to press close. Let's scroll down a bit further. Yep, that pretty much finishes off this section. Again, you should read through this properly, but I'm sort of skimming over the important parts for now. If we press next, we're moving on to creating the player scene. So what we're going to do now is start creating some nodes. Okay, so we're going to come over to our scene over the top here, and we're going to add a node in. We're going to do it using the method that it shows here, which is to click the other node. But again, you can search for nodes, you can press the plus, you can even do the command control A if you would like to. Whatever method, it doesn't really matter, but what we want is the node selection panel. And in here, we're going to search for an area 2D. So we can just start typing it, and then we can see here area 2D as a node type. Don't confuse that with the area 3D. We're doing a 2D game, so we want the 2D version. So we're just going to double click or press create down the bottom. And here we have our area 2. Okay, area 2D, sorry. We also want to make sure that that area 2D doesn't get moved around accidentally. So we're clicking on this little icon here. So with the area 2D chosen, I'm going to click on this section here. All right, it is to basically group nodes together. So if I move one node, I move them all, and you'll be able to see what that means a bit later on. But I'm just going to click it, and you can see I've got a little icon there to say that I've turned that on. The other thing I want to do is rename it, because it's not called Area 2D when we use it. I want to call it Player, which is listed over here. So I'm going to right click and choose to rename, and I'm just going to call it player. I'm using a capital P to match what is in the text here, the instructions, and that is important because a node with the name player in a capital P would be different to a node with a lowercase p. So it's very important that you keep the capitalization and the names the same, otherwise you're going to have some trouble following along with the work here. Okay, so we're going to move on from there. Scrolling down, we are going to add in a sprite. So we are going to, sorry, I just confused myself for a second there. We want to add in a new child node again, so making sure we've got player chosen first and choose to add a node. And this is going to be a sprite, so just start typing. And it's actually an animated sprite, so we want to show animation here. So I'm going to choose that node, all right, and that node then needs to have some things done to it. So we're going to firstly say, right, animated sprite, come across to our properties, and in the animation section we need to tell it which frames, so which individual pictures make up the animation. For the moment it is empty, there's none, so we're going to choose that drop down and say that we're going to create some new sprite frames. We could potentially load some if we had them already made, but we're going to create new ones. And then that says, yep, I'm going to make new frames, so I'm just going to double click on that to open now my frame editing. Moving down through here, we want to have an up and a walk animation. Okay, so I'm going to delete the one that's here, so delete. Yep, I don't want the default one. Sorry, that doesn't work. I keep forgetting. We're going to now add plus. Not sure why that keeps closing on me every time I do something, but that's okay. We're going to call this one up in lowercase to match instructions. Add another one, and that one's going to be renamed to be walk. Okay, so we've got two animation types, if you like, so we can tell it to animate in the walking style or animate in the up style. Each of these now need actual frames or pictures, and they're taken from our art resources. Over here in the file system, we're going to expand that out. We're going to scroll down until we find the matching ones, and they've been named quite nicely for us. So if we have the walk highlighted at the moment, then I want these two that are going to represent walking. So I can either shift select to do multiples and then drag them into the workspace in here, not up the top here, but in this workspace here for animations, and there you go. Or if I do the up one, I could just drag them one by one and put them in as well. Okay, so those are the two different animations that we can have. And if you press the play here, you can actually see your animation running up the top. If you can't see that very well, you might want to zoom in and out on it. By default, if you're using a mouse, the scroll wheel works for that. Otherwise, you can use other command options to zoom in and out, but I do strongly encourage an actual mouse because it makes certain things a bit easier. Alright, the next thing it talks about here is scaling our images, because they feel that the images are a bit too big, and in fact they want to scale them to be half their original size. So again, if I come over here to our sprite, so we're in the sprite node, and I come across here to these materials, sorry, the properties I should say, I come down to this one, node 2D, and I say let's transform, let's change the way it does something. And I want to use the scale factor. Now, scale factor of 1 means the original size, less than 1 means you are reducing it, and greater than 1 means increasing it. So as it says here, we want to scale it by 0.5, which basically means create half the size. So if I come in here and see scale, there's an X and a Y. So scaling in the X direction means scaling horizontally. Scaling Y, of course, means vertically. And by default, it is locked. So if I scale in one direction, it'll automatically scale by the same amount in the other. And because I want that to happen, that's actually quite useful. So I'm going to change my 1 to a 0.5. And of course, because it's locked, then the Y scales by the same amount. And you saw here now the image has gotten half the size. So it's scaled by a factor of 0.5 or half the original size. So far we have a player node which knows how to be animated essentially, but the actual picture doesn't give our character any physical shape. We need to do that now with what's called the collision shape 2D. So this is now the section that we are up to. So again, I'm going to choose my player as the default node, and I'm going to add a new child in whatever method I like, and I'm going to look for a collision shape, and I want that to be a collision shape 2D. So it's now added in here, and again it's giving me a warning that there's an issue, and that issue is that it doesn't have a shape itself. It's just a node with no shape. So as it says over here, I want to add a capsule 2D. So I'm going to come over to the collision shapes property. So again, make sure collision shape's chosen. Then that means these are the properties for the collision shape, and the shape itself, it is empty. So I'm going to click on that, and as the instructions suggest, I'm going to use a new capsule 2D. If I zoom in enough, you'll see that I've actually just added that capsule in by choosing it, and I can grab the little handles here to resize that to be essentially the size of my character. So it doesn't have to be super perfect, but just sort of close enough for the moment to cover the head, the feet, etc. Okay, and of course if I wanted to, I can turn that animation off just by choosing the animation sprite, and I can stop that animation just by pressing pause here. Okay, so I can see a bit better how it fits in. So as it says here, when we are finished with that, we should be done. We've got a player node with an animation sprite 2D as a child and a collision shape as a child. The animation has two different types of animations shown, and the collision shape has a sprite 2D, apologies. It has a capsule 2D as its shape. Now, if you haven't been doing so already, you should definitely be saving. So I'm going to look here and say, yep, it's definitely unsaved at the moment. So I'm going to go scene, and I'm going to say save the scene that I'm working on. Because we haven't saved it before, it's going to ask me for a name, and yep, I will leave that as player. But I'm going to give that a capital P here as well, and just press save. So it is now saved as player with a capital P. Again, that capital P is going to be important at a later time. So I'm going to leave this particular video there. The next section that we will be moving on to will be adding some code to our play. We're going to finally get it to start doing something. So right now we're just really setting up the bases of our game.